If you're a consultant, coach, or any kind of expert who sells your knowledge, Jerome Powell just made your job harder, and most people completely missed it. At their most recent meeting, the Fed held interest rates steady at 3.5 to 3.75%. The vote was 10-2, and Powell said the economy is on firm footing. Now, you might be thinking, okay, that's macroeconomic news. What does that have to do with me landing my next client? Everything. Because here's what that stable economy message actually means for anyone selling consulting or coaching services. Your clients just got permission to be pickier, a lot pickier. In this video, I'm going to show you exactly why this Fed decision changes the game for knowledge entrepreneurs, what the data says about how buyers are already behaving, and the one thing that separates the consultants who thrive in this environment from the ones who struggle. Stay with me. The Fed just paused after 3 consecutive rate cuts. Inflation is still running at 2.9%, above their 2% target. Job growth in December, just 50,000. That's the weakest since 2010 outside the pandemic. Powell's term ends in May. Futures markets are pricing in maybe 2 more rate cuts this year, possibly none in 2027. And there's all this political drama swirling around the Fed's independence. But here's the pattern you need to see. This isn't a recession. It's not a boom. It's that uncomfortable middle ground where companies aren't panicking, but they're not expanding aggressively either. And that middle ground, that's actually the most dangerous environment for consultants and coaches who aren't already known. So that's the economic backdrop, but here's what most people are missing. And this is the part that actually determines whether this news helps you or hurts you. There's a framework I use to think about how buyers make decisions in environments like this. And once you see it, you'll understand exactly where you stand and what you need to do about it. Let me walk you through it. First, let's translate the macro news into what it actually means for your business. When Powell says the economy is stable, here's what your clients hear. We're not in crisis mode, but we're not flush with cash either. Every dollar we spend needs to be justified. And when CFOs and decision makers are in that mindset, they don't stop buying consulting services. They don't slash budgets to zero. What they do is they get extremely selective about who they hire. Think about it from their perspective. If you're a VP or a director and you need to bring in outside expertise, you're putting your reputation on the line. If you hire someone who doesn't deliver, you have to explain that. You have to defend that decision. So here's where this gets personal. If you're a consultant or a coach or anyone else who's being paid for their expertise and who's great at what you do but relatively unknown in your market, this is the worst possible environment because the buyers aren't even considering you. You're not losing deals. You're just not getting into the conversation at all. Does that sound familiar? Have you noticed your pipeline feeling thinner? Prospects taking longer to decide? Fewer inbound inquiries, even though you're doing the same things that worked before? That's not a coincidence. That's the market telling you something. This framework, I call it the pre-decision window, and it explains exactly what's happening right now. Here's the idea. Most consultants and coaches think the sales process starts when the prospect reaches out to them. Someone sends an email, fills out a form, gets a referral. It feels like the beginning. But the research tells us something completely different. According to Forrester, 92% of B2B buyers already have at least one vendor in mind before they start formally evaluating options. 92%. And 41% have already selected a single preferred vendor before the evaluation even begins. Think about what that means. By the time a prospect contacts you, the decision is largely already made. You're not competing in an open field. You're either the front runner or you're fighting for scraps. Sixth Sense has been studying this for 6 years running, and their latest data shows that the vendor who is favored before first contact wins the deal 80% of the time. 80%. So the pre-decision window is that period before any outreach happens, before any RFP goes out, before any referral request, where the buyer's forming their preferences. And if you're not visible in that window, you're essentially invisible. Imagine you're trying to catch a train, but you show up at the station after the train has already left. That's what most consultants are doing. They're showing up to compete after the buyer's already decided who they want to work with. Now, here's where this gets really interesting. Gartner found that 61% of B2B buyers now prefer a completely rep-free buying experience. They don't want to talk to salespeople. They don't want to get on calls. They want to do their own research, form their own opinions, and reach out only when they've already decided. And buyers are interacting with 22% fewer vendors than they did just a year ago. The window is closing. The short list is getting shorter. And if you're not already on it, you're not getting considered. See the problem? I've watched this play out dozens of times, and the pattern is always the same. 2 consultants with nearly identical capabilities compete for the same engagement. One has a body of work that people can find, maybe a book or maybe a podcast, maybe they speak at industry events. Maybe they've been published in places their buyers respect. When you search for their topic, they show up. When someone asks for a recommendation, their name comes up. The other consultant is just as good at the actual work, maybe even better sometimes, but they're unknown. There's no body of work, no recognized point of view, nothing that exists outside of their client engagements. Who wins? The known consultant. Not because they're better at delivering results, because the buyer already trusted them before the first conversation happened. The unknown consultant never got a shot. So what actually works? The data points to one thing: tangible authority. Being the known expert in your space before the buyer starts searching. The Edelman LinkedIn research is really clear on this. They surveyed 3,500 decision makers and found that 73% of B2B executives trust thought leadership more than traditional marketing materials. And 60% say they're willing to pay a premium to work with someone who produces high quality thought leadership. This isn't about being famous. It's not about having 1 million followers. It's about having a body of work that demonstrates your expertise, something that exists outside of you, something buyers can find, consume, and use to form an opinion about you before they ever reach out. And in an environment where 80% of deals go to the pre-contact favorite, that positioning is everything. The consultants who are thriving right now, the ones who don't seem affected by economic uncertainty, all have one thing in common. They have an asset working for them, something that builds trust and credibility before the first conversation, something that gets them on the buyer's shortlist on day one. Without that asset, you're invisible. With that asset, you're the obvious choice. The question now becomes, how do you actually build that kind of authority without spending the next year trying to become a writer or a content creator? Because here's what I've learned. Working with consultants and experts for years, the ones who win aren't necessarily better at what they do. They just have an asset that does the positioning for them, something that pre-sells their expertise before the first meeting ever happens. And that's why I pulled out this video here for you to watch next. It walks you through exactly how we help experts build that asset, a book, in 90 days, not by teaching you to write, but by extracting what's already in your head and turning it into something that attracts clients. You'll see how the extraction process works, how we structure it so the book pre-sells your services, and why we back the whole thing with an ROI guarantee. It's the fastest path I've found to becoming the authority in your space.